They see what's called a distressed asset, and they have...
Yeah. So, the distressed asset, and the thing that you said about leveraged buyouts. So this is something... You don't need to know all the details necessarily, but it's just something you should be aware of, especially if you have, retirement accounts, 401k, and all that. Because this is something that is a serious, serious problem. What's going on is that these companies... So you have these distressed assets, right? These are... Typically, they're just normal companies that are not doing well. So what'll happen is these private equity firms will come in and they'll do this leveraged buyout thing. And a leveraged buyout is basically when a private equity firm, or really any company, takes out a giant loan to buy another company. So that's what they do. The private equity companies, they take out these giant loans to buy these dying companies or struggling companies. Then what they do is they will strip the company for parts, sell it off, make a whole bunch of money, and then you're left with basically a shell of a company that has been, to use the new term, enshittified, the enshittification term that everyone talks about. So these companies basically turn to these companies that they buy basically turn to garbage once they're stripped for parts, and everything that's really useful has been sold off. And then what happens is, either the company, like he said, will get sold off, or what frequently happens more and more now is because there's a legal loophole, the private equity firms will actually saddle the shell of a former company that they bought. They'll saddle that with the debt from their leveraged buyout. So all the loans that the private equity firm took out, they'll put the debt on the company that they bought, because there's some weird legal loophole that lets them do that. And then when the company goes bankrupt, the private equity guys, they've made a huge profit, and then the company that they bought, it goes bankrupt, it dies, but they don't have to deal with it because it's they basically put the debt on that company that they bought. And to make things worse, the debt is now being sold to retirement funds. And just recently, President Trump did the opposite of a good thing, and he signed an executive order that basically lets different kinds of retirement funds, looks at 401k investors, it lets them look into private equity as investment options, which you don't want. Because if you take on these debts in your 401k, you're going to lose a ton of money. So this is just something that I think everybody should be aware of, is that your 401k and other investment stuff, there is a serious chance that you could end up with a fund that has invested in this private equity, in these in these bankrupted companies, and that you could lose a ton of money. So I guess just, obviously not financial advice, blah, 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 all the disclaimers. But, just try and make sure you're keeping an eye on this and trying to avoid these kinds of things, because it is a serious problem. And of course, I can't take credit for this knowledge. There was somebody else who, I think Tiffany Cianci was her name. She's got like a YouTube channel and stuff. She's the one who discovered a lot of this. She was on InfoWars a few months ago talking about it too. So, it's legit. But the information is legit. Yeah. Yep, Fractured, exactly. More fell for it again awards. And, yeah. All right, cool, Slosh. I will take a look in Discord at some of that Raimi stuff. I actually have a ton of archived stuff from the old Spider-Man movies. I managed to get my hands on so the first two movies they got a release of the Danny Elfman score, and I have a couple of, at least two of the releases for 1 and 2, but for Spider-Man 3 they never released an official version of the score. But there has been so apparently the composer for 3, Christopher Young, sent out a CD to a fan at some point with an unofficial copy of the score for Spider-Man 3, and I managed to get my hands on a copy. a digital copy. So I actually have a copy of the score for Spider-Man 3, which is pretty cool. Yeah, you see ads for Vanguard now promoting retirement stuff. Yeah. Well, Vanguard isn't a private equity firm. Vanguard is like an actual financial firm, like like Fidelity or whatever. So Vanguard actually is the company that manages a lot of these retirement funds. The thing you have to keep an eye on is what's inside your funds. So are you invested in these private equity firms or in any of these like private equity debts? So I am, this is another one of those, exactly, another fell for it again award, as Fractured put it. And it's one of those things that I'm, again, just like with the H-1B abuse, I'm very, very disappointed in Trump for doing that. And in fact, I have one thing to say to him.
Shame on you.